Welcome to My Comic Shop History. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. At long last, I am at Acme Comics in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I am joined by the store's manager, Lord Retail, Mr. Jermaine Exum. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. You know, I never thought that when I first heard your first season and I was telling everybody I knew to listen to it, I never thought I'd be sitting across from you in person in the store and have you talking to me about stuff.
I'm so happy that this worked out. And, you know, I enjoy doing this for a lot of reasons, both personal and creative, and maybe financial, depending on how the Kickstarter campaign goes. But honestly, like this right here, I think is the heart of it. Being able to connect with people and forge these friendships where now we are here in person. It's really an amazing thing. It's like you never know what's going to happen. And you pick up a microphone and you start doing something like this.
I mean, what you said gets to the heart in that universal kernel of so many of the things happening, not in every comic shop, but in a lot of comic shops. That kernel of what you just said, connecting with people, that's there.
Exactly. So you and I, we're going to do a bit of recording here, my friend. This is a first for my podcasts. This is part one of a two-part crossover. So this is part one, My Comic Shop History. And then part two is going to be next week in the other podcast that I host, Flat Squirrel Tales Beyond My Comic Shop. So we're going to have an epic conversation, and it's going to be spread across 2 weeks and 2 podcasts. So that's the plan.
I'm excited about it. Let's see where things go. Let's see what you can extract from me. I can be a difficult conversation sometimes.
You warned me ahead of time via email that you can be a difficult interview, and you said that you don't like to talk about yourself.
I think I said hostile witness, perhaps.
I don't think it was that dramatic, but maybe. But and in person too, since we've been hanging out here in advance of this podcast, you keep warning me, so I'm a little nervous, but I think we'll be okay.
It depends on what mood I'm in. I don't easily, despite appearances of Lord Retail online, I don't often easily talk about myself and, things, accomplishments. Let's call it what it is. Some pretty cool things have happened in my time that I've been a part of, but I don't often easily talk about it.
It's funny because you've come up a number of times on the episodes this season, either Acme generally, but specifically you. A number of other retailers I've had on the show have cited you as an example, as someone they look to, for guidance on what to do in the industry. And I know you've been listening to the episodes. I mean, what has that been like to hear these other retailers cite you like that?
It's been an honor, a tremendous honor, because several years ago, I felt very isolated, in the comics community. You work in your store, you go home, you don't really go to other stores, you're not going to retailer meetings, you're not part of anything. It's easy to feel isolated. Like it's just you rolling the rock up the hill. Nobody else knows what that feels like. No one else knows what you're talking about. But, over the years, certainly through having used the Lord Retail identity, using Twitter, participating in Diamond Retailer Summits, Comics Pro, it's helped me to feel more part of things. And just hearing from other shops that I guess they're aware of me or care what I think about stuff. That's tremendous. It really is. Especially the Zap Comics episode. That was the one that I was really like, he seems like he's describing something that could very well be not just Anytown, USA. That kind of sounds like around here. And there came a point where he was apparently in this store. I had no idea it was him, and he had a pretty good interaction with me and the what the store offers. I was floored by that. I had to hit pause, collect myself, and then listen again, and that was incredible.
Yeah, no, and that was completely unprompted. This was Ben Lichtenstein, the owner of Zap Comics in Wayne, New Jersey, and he started talking about a recent trip to North Carolina, and he hit a number of shops in the area. And at first I didn't know exactly where it was going, but I suspected it might lead to Acme, and sure enough it did. So he had, from his account, he really had a positive experience and was very impressed with the store. And I can tell you, I mean, really, all the stores I featured this season, I think, are doing interesting, cool things. Zap in particular, I think, is a really strong store, really strong business, and I think Ben has a really keen business sense. And so I think getting that vote of confidence from him, I think, is a really cool thing.
It's so uncanny. It just is. But with the power of social media, which my venue of choice is Twitter, really. And again, participating in retailer meetings, you're able to interact with people from all over the country, or it could be other countries, depending. And comics is a small world. It just is. It's an already small world, but then connections can be made.
Yeah. Now, on the note of this Lord Retail alter ego, so this was an online handle that you adopted a number of years ago, and it is the way that a lot of people know you. Do you find there are people who know you as Lord Retail who might not even know your real name?
So, first, I should preface this by saying I did not give myself that name. I did not do that. It's like just that name automatically, for some people, the reaction is, who's this guy think he is? What's the deal with that?
It's not a name dripping with humility.
No, I did not give myself that name. There came a point where I needed to pick a message board name for myself on Bendis' Jinx World website.
Which is sadly now defunct.
Yes, but the connections made there, some of the people that you've seen this during your visit, I know exclusively and only because of that place. So the connections are still very strong. It was the right place at the right time for a lot of people. So while struggling and agonizing over coming up with a proper screen name for myself that wasn't Transformers related, I remembered that a longtime customer at one point came in, started calling me Lord Retail for no reason, and bowing as he came to the table for no good reason. And I remembered that moment. I said, Lord Retail, I'll take it. That's what I'm going to use. There have been moments where I've been at a comic book convention and I will interact with a creator, just as Jermaine from Acme Comics. And it's not that I'll get a cold reception, but when someone across the room says, hey, Lord Retail, I get a totally different, a switch flips, the person stands up, it's like, oh, I didn't know that was you. It's a little weird because I don't really have like a t-shirt. Like I have little buttons now, but I don't have a t-shirt so that people kind of know what's going on. And I don't always say, I'm Lord Retail. I don't always do that. But if it comes up, I have seen the reaction change in a positive way.
In advance of this recording, I listened to your appearance on the Stuff Said podcast hosted by our mutual friend Greg Schiegel. And I know he was very fascinated by this dual identity. The fact that you have almost a secret identity, not too dissimilar from these comic book characters that we spend so much time reading. And I know, one of his lines of questioning was about, where the line is. Where does, Jermaine end and Lord Retail begin? And, that interview was a few years ago. I think it was back in 2013. Has it changed at all for you?
I am still trying to, at risk of being overly dramatic, I have asked myself that question. Where does Lord Retail begin? Where does Jermaine end? And the lines do get blurred a lot, where I can be always on duty sometimes. Whether I'm in the post office or if I'm at home or if I'm in the heart of a Wednesday, sometimes I'm always on. Greg's fascinated by many things, so that was definitely something he did wonder about. I wonder about it myself sometimes too. I know we were talking earlier about the Superman and Batman analogy.
Yes.
That helped me remember the wording. I don't remember that Superman is something that Clark Kent does sometimes.
Yeah, so there have been a number of different interpretations. One that always resonated with me was that, Clark is who I am, Superman is what I can do. So that always resonated. But for me, and I think I've talked about this on some podcast at some point, but I've always believed that there are three personas within the one character. Maybe this is the Catholic in me, the three persons in one God. I don't know. But, you have Clark, the reporter, you have Superman, but there's a third. And I think the third is the true self. And the third is Clark on the farm. because I feel like there, and again, this might be the Smallville fan in me because I spend so much time watching that show, but I really feel like that's where he is truly himself. And when he puts on the glasses or he puts on the cape, there's an element of disguise involved with both. That's always been my take on it. I feel like it's a similar thing with Batman as well, where I think you have Bruce in the cave, and that's the truest version of the character, and then you have Bruce the Playboy and Batman. And I think when he puts on the tux and when he puts on the cape and cowl, again, there's disguise involved with both. But Bruce in the cave and Clark on the farm, I feel, are the true versions of those characters. That's always been my take.
I've never heard anyone articulate that third element. Most people just focus on Clark Kent and Superman. I've never heard anyone prior to today mention that, and I feel like that's there, and that's an awesome observation. I like the thing about Superman being something Clark Kent can do. I like that, but I'm probably doing the Batman thing, where I'm always on, not eating, not sleeping, not taking care of myself, and I'm always out there doing the Lord Retail thing. Occasionally Jermaine will appear for like a, family reunion or something like that, where, that's what I got to be. But,
is there an equivalent? Like, what would be Jermaine in the cave? What's your cave? Or your farm, I suppose.
What is my farm? I need to find the farm. I'm gonna work on that. I am aware of, where do I stop? Where do I start? I'm aware of that. So I'm trying to balance it out. Maybe 60-40, whereas I think that for a good while, it was about 95-5, something of that nature, and that's don't really quite want to do it that way anymore.
I mean, do you find, and I would imagine this to be the case, that when you are online as Lord Retail, perhaps you feel more free to say certain things that you might hold back if you were posting as Jermaine? I mean, is that the case?
I'm fairly measured on online. Occasionally I'll say something silly or something intended to make people laugh, or some observation about a movie, or just something of that nature to kind of keep the mood a little light. But my goal is typically to be as positive and constructive as possible. On Tuesday nights, I will read between, let's say, 15 and 25 comic books, between probably the hours of 8 o'clock and midnight. And I never post spoilers. I won't do that. But I will perhaps say something that either a retailer that cannot read a bunch of stuff because they have other obligations, or they just don't read a bunch of stuff, something that maybe they can work with to say, oh, we have X-Men fans, and I guess the X-Men are in Venomverse this week, for example. They're not. But just something that another retailer can perhaps work with. Or if you are a fan of Dr. Fate or something, then Dr. Fate is in this Batman comic book. Keep an eye out for it. Just something to give people a little extra insight when they hit that new release shelf on Wednesdays. So I will occasionally read something where there's not a whole lot to say, or I just didn't connect with it. Even now, I'm not saying it was not good. I'm just saying I didn't connect with it. So I'm usually not going to post anything about that. I'm going to try to focus on something constructive.
Right. Actually, those Tuesday night Twitter reviews, I want to circle back to that a little bit later, because one of the main things that I want to get at with you is the role of the retailer in the industry today. And so I want to talk about some of the things that you do. I want to talk about some of the things that have been brought up in past episodes and get your take on it. But just for a moment more, staying on this Jermaine Lord Retail divide, we probably don't know each other well enough for me to say this, and I hope you don't take it the wrong way, but I feel like maybe don't overthink it. I don't know. Like, I don't want this to be a source of stress for you. Where trying to figure out where one ends and one begins. I mean, you are all things. You are Lord Retail and you are Jermaine. I mean, whatever you happen to call yourself at the moment. Well, I mean, what do you think?
It's not so much what I call myself as what I will answer to.
Okay.
How about that? I don't know. I do tend to overthink things. That is something that I will do. I don't know if people know that about me, but I tend to run through all various scenarios that might happen. I'll put a book on the shelf. I'll say, would a person find it here or would they find it there? Will this stack fall off the shelf overnight? Should I do this? Should I do that? I'll kind of run over through some scenarios. And yes, that falls into overthinking, but I think that it is an attention to detail. And I'm not saying that, there's things that slip through the cracks. I'm not that obsessive about detail, but I have something of an eye for it, that I at least consider things. So I do tend to overthink, but hopefully it is to my advantage and not a detriment.
Going back to what we said before, you warned me that you can be a difficult interview. It's funny because there are a number of people who have been on the show who, have not podcasted before, and they expressed some concern, not exactly the same concern that you expressed, but, they were a little bit nervous. They didn't know how well they would do or whatever. And I found across the board, once people start talking, once they get going, it's just, it just flows. And I actually was interviewed recently by an outlet. It was a show called Fictional Frontiers. And the host asked me an interesting question. I wanted to, kind of pass it along and ask it to you, because his question was, do I think that comic book retailers are well suited for this because they deal in stories? They are surrounded by these stories. They sell them, they read them, and you're just so well versed in telling a story that you become storytellers yourselves.
I wouldn't necessarily assume that is a logical train of thought, but I wouldn't necessarily assume that because you are interested in, consume, and can process stories, that's just something you do, that you can then tell stories. Not necessarily. You can be a huge movie fan and you can analyze movies and shots and directors, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can then make a movie or, instruct someone else on how to make a movie. Not necessarily. And sometimes people that work in the comic shops, they have things, hang-ups, and sometimes those are the things that may come to the forefront rather than storytelling.
Right. Well, fair enough. There was one other thing from your interview with Greg that I wanted to follow up on with you, because in that episode, and I don't know how well you remember this, because again, this was a few years ago, and I know you say you have a very poor memory.
I do. Let's assume that I don't remember a whole lot.
I'll refresh your recollection. So in the episode, Greg kind of took you to task, very playfully and in a friendly way, but...
He does that on a weekly basis. Anytime I talk to Greg, I am at some point taken to the task.
So, again, you say you don't like to talk about yourself. Sort of Greg's point, I think, was that, you say you don't like to talk about yourself, but then you do have this, Lord Retail moniker, and some of the tweets and the online postings, they are sort of a little bit vague and may invite further inquiry. So the example he used was if you said, like, oh, I just had a really crazy conversation. It's the kind of thing, well, if you don't really want to talk about yourself, you might not post something like that, because it sort of begs the question, oh, like, what was the conversation? What happened? So I think Greg was trying to, reconcile that.
I think that, and this is something that comes up, people have known me for years, and not in a comics-related way. This is kind of a thing. I think that what my intent there is for people to know that I am working on something. Know that something is in the works. And it may not be something that I can immediately talk about, but it's like, okay, fingers crossed, working on something, or just had a crazy conversation. We'll see what comes of that. I guess maybe it's an ego thing that I want people to know that I'm trying to do something today, or maybe that's what it is. There's no or. That's probably what that is. Just so that people know that I'm not sitting on my hands, I guess, and I'm trying to do something extra.
As you know, and as listeners know, I was and continue to be fascinated by Steve Odo, the former owner of Alternate Realities, my comic shop. And I'm kind of similarly fascinated with you, but in a different way. So you and Steve are very different, but I think, and it took me a while to figure this out with Steve, I think what interests me about him as a person and as a film subject or a podcast subject is that I feel he is a man of contradictions, where, he owned a retail store but hates people. And, he took great delight in shattering people's dreams when they would come in with a collection they were looking to sell, and he would tell them, what you have is worth nothing. But at the same time, he could be so gregarious and so generous. So I think, those contradictions were always interesting to me. And I think there's a little bit of an element of that with you. Again, we don't know each other super well yet, but I feel like, again, even what we were just getting at as far as, being Lord Retail, but not liking to talk about yourself. Maybe that element of contradiction is something that, I kind of see some similarities there.
I can't explain why that is. I don't know. Why do I not like to talk about myself? I've been asked that question kind of recently. I don't necessarily have an answer for it. I don't know if it's some, superhero. You don't do this so that people will know you just did something. I don't know if that's what it is. That's reflecting in some way that perhaps isn't helpful. It's like if I'm doing this thing, well, people kind of need to know that I'm doing this thing. But then on the other hand, I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be too loud about this thing because I'm doing it for these reasons, not that people will say, oh, look at that guy, he's doing something. I don't know. That's a string that is dangling off of my sweater that is there to be pulled on, I suppose.
Well, Germain and Lord Retail, that's one thing. But then there's Lord Retail / Germain and Acme. And as I was planning this crossover episode, initially I was thinking, well, for my comic shop history, we'll really talk about Acme. And then for the Flat Squirrel Tales episode, that's where we'll really talk about Lord Retail and get into that. But honestly, I feel like Acme and Lord Retail are so intertwined that I felt it would be more effective to really just have one long conversation and just kind of divide it, in half. That's my sense, and that's what I ultimately decided to pursue. So, we are here at Acme Comics. The store will be celebrating its 35th anniversary next year in 2018. It is described on the Facebook page as the Triad's oldest and largest comic specialty shop. For people who are not familiar with North Carolina like myself, what does the Triad refer to?
Okay, that's something that I forget constantly, that the terminology Triad outside of Central North Carolina probably doesn't mean a whole lot, and I forget that sometimes. So when you talk about the Triad, you're talking about 3 cities. You're talking about Greensboro, you're talking about High Point, North Carolina, which may be known for the furniture market. That's something big that happens there. And you're talking about Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And that is, I think that's where a lot of cigarettes were made. I'm not a smoker, so I don't really remember that. But I think that's what that place was known for, historically. And those are 3 cities that are probably about 20, 25 minutes apart. So in theory, people will move between these 3 cities, to maybe go eat here one day or go to some event there one day. It's a very interconnected 3 cities. So
cool.
That's the Triad terminology.
Gotcha.
Thank you for bringing that up.
No, just trying to, place the store in the, its proper context geographically so people have a sense of where it is. So Acme was established in 1983. You started working here at age 20.
That sounds about right.
So over 20 years now of experience, and you are the store's manager. For a time I thought you were the owner. I didn't realize who is the owner or who are the owners.
A lot of people think that, and I will always quickly correct them once I know that they think that. Sometimes I don't know they think that until it comes up. Original owner of the store is a man named Mark Austin. He was a lifelong comic book collector, and he basically was tired of not being able to find the comics he was looking for. So he said, okay, I will open a store, and then I won't miss the comics I'm looking for anymore. Actually, on not the last week of September, but the week before that will be 21 years of official employment. Now, I've been around, I think, for about maybe a year and a half of just volunteering. Just kind of hanging out at the shop. Hey, can I help out with something?
That's how you get a job at a comic shop.
No one knows that. Many people, they'll come in, inquire about employment. I've never seen them before. I never see them again.
We would have that at Alternate Realities where people would come in and it's like, who are you? We've never seen you before. And also, for those of us who were the employees, we don't want anybody else. But yeah, it was always like, who are you?
Yeah, that's a secret that you're going to learn by listening to this podcast. If you want to work in a comic book store, you have to show up at a comic book store. You have to already kind of be a familiar face. And even if there's not an opportunity immediately, you still have to become a familiar face, not an unknown quantity. You have to be something of a familiar face. And not just literally a face, but someone that shows up, shows interest in the business. Sometimes people show up and they don't necessarily know exactly where they are. They've done no research on what the nature of this business is. So that's your secret on how to pursue something in a comic book store.
So that was how you landed your job at Acme.
Basically, I would leave my actual job and come over here to, I made fast friends with the part-time guy that was working here, a guy named Joe Schramm. Made fast friends with him, and I wanted to come see my friend at the comic book store. That sounds like something fun, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You guys recently had you celebrated your birthday together, correct?
Yes. He's been with me through ups and downs, and one of the most consistent things in my adult life. He's been the best possible friend to me, and I just talked to him as recently as today.
Very cool. What was the job that you held prior?
I've only had 2 jobs in my life. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. For some people, they say, oh, that's about right. You've had 2 jobs. Prior to that, I was, let's not sugarcoat it. I was a grease monkey. I would change oil. I would eventually get my North Carolina vehicle inspector's license. And I don't know if that's something that happens everywhere, but in North Carolina, once a year, your tires have to be checked out for a certain tread depth, your turn signals, that type of thing.
Sure.
Various things. I think that emission controls, as far as like what's coming out of the tailpipe, I think that's been rolled back a little bit. But that was something that, I got licensed to do. And at a relatively young age, someone that was pretty quiet and didn't really like to talk to people would have to tell a person 2, maybe 3 times my age, your car does not pass inspection today. You need to get this fixed, and you need to come back within 30 days. And that'll get you out of your shell real fast, having to interact on not necessarily and that can be adversarial. It can be. So, and that was not comic books. That was something, I didn't necessarily have a passion for. But having to interact in that way, I was able to. Maybe that was the building blocks of Lord Retail. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I always felt that working at the comic shop helped me come out of my shell because I used to be very shy, and I still can be, but I have gotten over that, I think, to a large extent, and through the podcast as well. But, working at the store, you interact with so many different kinds of people from all walks of life, all occupations. And in my case, I started working there, in high school. So most of the people who were coming in were older. So it just forced you to interact with different kinds of people. But at least there, it's not adversarial. They're coming in to make a purchase, and you're there to help them make the purchase. And you, in general, you even if you don't like the same types of things, there's that shared love of comics. So you're coming at it from common ground. But yeah, I could see how what you did might be a little more challenging.
Yeah, that was a little more. Was a little more challenging, shall we say? But
going back to the ownership of Acme. So you told me about the original owner. Is that still the owner, or has
yes,
it? Yeah, okay.
Yes, that is so.
So, and how active is he in the store?
Not very. When it comes to ordering material, displaying material, what product lines we're going to carry, what we're going to discontinue, that's entirely up to me and the staff that works here to make those determinations.
It's like a lot of autonomy that you have.
It is. It wasn't always so. I think that I have, through results, shall we say, kind of earned some autonomy that it works that way over these 21 years.
What sort of contact do you guys have? Like, do you have regular meetings? Does the dynamic?
It can vary. It can vary. Sometimes it could be weekly. Sometimes it could be monthly. It just depends on how busy he is. And sometimes my goal is to get in this store and see what's going on here. That's usually my primary goal, just to see what's going on here, what we need to be doing, and what we can do.
When we were emailing in advance of meeting in person, you said that over 35 years, Acme has a story, maybe a story unlike any other. And I don't expect you to recount the entire 35-year history, but was there something specific in that you were pointing to?
Not necessarily. It's just Acme has been a big part of the community, and many people have come and gone and left impacts at this place. And I think that there is some type of story there that not just from me, but from many, many, many people that would need to be talked to, that would be of interest to people to know. That's just my opinion on it. Maybe I'm too close to the subject matter to be objective, but I genuinely believe that's so.
One of the articles that I came across in my prep talked about how, again, Acme has been around so long that it, in a lot of ways, like helped define the concept of the local comic shop. Because, of course, there was a time when there were no comic shops. You would get your comics at a newsstand. And then these comic book specialty shops arose, and you had the rise of the direct market and all of that. And, Acme was one of those early stores. So I do think it's interesting to have been around for that long and to kind of set the tone for what would come.
I guess I hadn't really looked at it that way. Again, forest for the trees. I never really looked at it that way. I was kind of a spinner rack kid. You would go to the drugstore, you would go to the gas station. That's where I would usually get my comics from. But I don't know if Acme was my first comic book store I discovered. It may very well have been.
Yes, your comic shop. What is your comic shop history?
We moved to Greensboro in, I think, 1985. And I remember discovering the Acme Comics downtown and, wondering what it was and trying to, get in there, get my mom to take me in there. And it was a store that sold comic books. That's what they had. I didn't necessarily know what new releases were. I didn't really know what back issues were. Didn't really know what the comics behind the counter were, but I knew what comic books were at that point. And it was a place that sold comic books. That's what it did. And that was kind of amazing. And I couldn't always get to that store. It was a little difficult to get a special trip over there as opposed to we're already at this convenience store. We're already here, so maybe get something off the rack over there.
If you don't mind me asking, is owning the store yourself something that you have pursued or would like to pursue in the future?
It is something that I have thought about and in many ways have been, whether I knew I was doing it or not, been on some sort of path towards, if that makes sense. Because I think part of what I do here is, this is at risk of, I don't want to sound a certain way, but I kind of operate and make decisions and choices in here and represent this business as if I did own it. I don't know when I started doing that. Maybe that was from day one in some ways, but I think that is something that has contributed to my success here, I guess, is that I kind of treat it that way. I do think about it pretty frequently, and it's something where I have to kind of really think about, is this something that I do want to take that step into, and is it something that can work? Not that I want to make it work, but is this something that can work? These are things that I think about pretty often, especially at this stage in life.
Has the owner ever asked you if you would be interested in that?
It's been discussed many times over the years. So it's not this pipe dream necessarily. There's discussions there, but it's also, I don't want it to be a carrot that is dangling either, that I'm constantly chasing. But again, at this stage, there's been more frequent conversation, more, I won't say genuine, but I'm going to use that word as a placeholder. It's been more genuine conversation as far as that goes.
Well, I'm sure if and when you decide to take that step, it's one that I think would be welcomed by this community here and the one that you've amassed online as well. I mean, that's definitely the sense I get. And, the fact that all these other retailers, are pointing to you, I think that really says a lot.
It can come with a lot of pressure. I don't want to be, I'm very thankful that is so. I'm very, very thankful that people value my opinions, that people care so much. That's what that is. They care so very much about this place and me. They do. but it can be a lot of pressure sometimes too. It can be.
Yeah, it can be a big thing, and I think Steve realized that too when the store was closing. That he really, I think he had a sense of this before, and again, we were always so big on the community and that aspect of it, but I think he was really struck, especially at the end there, when all of those people were customers who he hadn't seen in a long time or whatever were coming through again, and I think he was kind of overwhelmed and hadn't realized the effect that he had on so many people and that the store had and the meaning that the store had for so many people. So, it can be a big thing. We'll get back to my conversation with Jermaine in a second. I just wanted to take a moment to remind everyone that the My Comic Shop Country Kickstarter campaign is currently underway. If you've been enjoying these podcasts, this is what it's all been leading toward: a new documentary movie exploring comic book stores across America. Any amount you're able to give is greatly appreciated, and there are some great rewards to choose from. I'm seeking to raise $15,000 through the campaign. As of this recording, we are a little more than a third of the way there. The first week went very well, but we still have a long way to go. Thank you to everyone who has already pledged, and if you haven't pledged yet, don't be a flat squirrel. On maybe a lighter note, speaking of these retailers I've been speaking to in these episodes, because I know you've been listening, which I appreciate, what have I not asked a retailer that I should have, or something where you're like you're waiting for you're waiting for a question or for something to be addressed and it hasn't come up yet?
I feel like you were very thorough in a lot of ways.
I wasn't fishing for a compliment. Thank you.
No, that's not what that was. I do feel like you were genuinely thorough, and there are very rare instances where I've said, well, he didn't ask about that. There's an elephant in the room. He did not even acknowledge it at all. I don't think that's happened, but I have asked you if you had considered talking to stores in a certain area that don't have a friendly relationship, because that does exist, and I've never really seen that aspect of the comic book world, because there could be a place that sells shoes over here and a place that sells shoes over there, and it's not like that. It's not like that. Or there's a hamburger place here, hamburger place right there, and it's not like that. But with comic book stores, it can get weird.
It can get weird and it can get territorial. And I know you asked me that recently, and that's something that, yes, I would be interested in exploring if I could get people to talk about it. It's really interesting. So I guess a little dirt that I can share. I won't name names, but this is something that's been on my mind, and I wanted to share it and I guess get your take on it as well. So, a number of the stores I've featured on the podcast, there are other stores in the area, and I do often ask, what is the relationship like with other stores? And pretty much across the board, what I'm getting in these episodes is we get along, we help each other. It all seems very positive. And I think in some cases, and maybe even most cases, that's true. I don't mean to make it sound like I think they're being disingenuous. However, with the exception of the Kickstarter special that ran last week, there have been 2 episodes this season where I have doubled up shops, where the episode has featured two episodes in one. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I want to be able to feature as many stores as possible, and I have a limited number of episodes that I'm working with, so it makes sense. And sometimes episodes just aren't, recordings, aren't long enough or whatever to really stand on their own, and they really make more sense as, an addendum to another episode. So I thought that would be fine. And one of the stores that was involved in one of these double episodes was very upset about it after the fact and sent me an email expressing as much, and said that they, didn't want to be, featured alongside their nearest competition, and that they would have preferred I didn't run their segment at all, which that probably struck me more than anything, because I guess my feeling is it's free advertising. Why would, it seems like why would you rather not be featured at all? But that was their position, and I won't say who it was. However, of the 4 stores that have been featured in these compilation episodes, 3 of them posted it, and shared the fact that they were on this podcast, and 1 store didn't. So if you're really curious and you want to know, I think with a little detective work, you don't have to be Batman, you can figure it out. But it was really disappointing, because I had a positive experience with this retailer at their store. I enjoyed the store, I enjoyed the conversation, and it was disheartening to know that I had offended them to that extent, because that's certainly never my intention. This is always meant to be a celebration of comic book shops. And, you know, to find out that that retailer felt that way, it was disappointing. But at the same time, this is where like the journalist in me is like, you know, I think it's a good thing that it happened and it becomes part of the story of this season because, again, you're hearing so much about how, oh, we all get along with the people next to us. And it seems like maybe that's not the case. And I don't know that it was even that they don't get along. I just think it's that, you know, that competition that's there, even if it's not always discussed.
For me, and I don't know if people think that I'm, you know, a lot of people think that I just throw out sound bites. Maybe I do that. I don't know. Or maybe the things I say are just that catchy. I don't know. But I have felt this for many, many, many years, and it has become even more applicable today. The comic shop's competition is not necessarily the shop down the road or the shop in the next city. Competition at the comic book store is Amazon, and it is eBay. That is your competition. If you are sold out of something that day, most customers are going to not drive across town. Some will, but most customers are going to reach it in their pocket and buy the thing that you didn't have. And that is the ultimate competition. There's so much competition that's on a level that maybe you don't even notice that's what it is. It's like this macro competition that you're so worried about what this place over here is doing that you didn't see what just happened.
There's that. And the other thing too is, and this is, you know, this has come up in these episodes from time to time. If you're a true comic fan, you've been to the stores in your area, right? Or if you go to a new area, you check out the stores that are there. So I don't know, you know, that a listener hearing about these two stores, like, I don't know how much that would really hurt one of the stores. I don't know. I can't quantify that, but I just feel like I agree with what you're saying. I think there is, as far as competition goes, there's really that much larger issue.
I think that maybe it's just that thing about comic shops that I said that perhaps this, you know, this hamburger place or this clothing store maybe doesn't have, or maybe they do, and I'm not aware of that industry. Maybe they do have that, but maybe there's that other thing that's we don't quite know what that is, I guess.
Yeah. Well, when that happened, then I thought like, oh, maybe there's like bad blood. I didn't realize, but I mentioned it to the other store, and they just found it amusing. So I don't know that there was necessarily anything specific beyond just the proximity of the quote unquote competition. I don't know to what extent you want to address this, and I leave it to your discretion, but I am curious about what the comic shop scene is like here and what your relationship is like with the retailers in your territory here.
In 21 years, I've seen places come and go. I've seen that on the local comic book scene. Sometimes I will acknowledge, and I don't always know what to make of this, that I often know more about the comic scene in other states than I do in North Carolina.
Oh, interesting.
You know, I will talk to Pittsburgh Comics weekly, if not daily. I will talk to Oh Yeah Comics in Muncie or Harrison. I'll talk to them weekly. Sometimes I know more about what's going on other places than I know what's going on here, like actively going on. There's another new store in, well, not new, I guess they've been around 2 years maybe, Comic Dimension in town. They specialize more in gaming, which there's definitely a market for that. You know, there's several colleges in town, and not just to say college students play HeroClix or various things, because a lot of people do, but they do have comics over there, and but they do specialize more in games and like in-store gaming. So I've never been a gamer myself, so I don't know anything about that, and I guess probably never will. So they do more of that type of thing. They will, one of the guys over there will come in from time to time, talk about comics and stuff. So that's cool. I think that's a good relationship. If somebody is looking for games, we'll send them over there. You know, that's how that's supposed to work, right? If you're looking for this thing, we know we don't have it. If you have a good relationship with the place, try over there.
Right. Especially, I think, when stores can kind of carve out their own corner, right, and do something like focus on gaming, which is something that, you know, you don't zero in on here. I think that can probably work better than stores that are doing exactly the same thing. So if you don't mind me bringing this up, you know, I know that recently a gentleman who worked here left and opened another store in the Greensboro area. And I mean, to whatever extent you're willing to share your feelings on the matter, I mean, what was it like, I guess, especially when you found out that the new store was going to be in Greensboro?
What are my feelings on that? I guess the bottom line on that is not that there was going to be a new store in Greensboro that was a second location of a shop, out of Winston-Salem. That's not what the concern was to me at all. It's not that, someone I'd known for so long, 10 plus years, pretty close to, I thought, was going to be a part of that. It's not any of that. It's just, I didn't know any of that was happening.
Okay.
That's the thing, and that's not even a business thing. That's like a personal, like, human being kind of thing. I didn't know who was going to be in the store. Like that's the thing for me. There was a certain, like, this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to move on to do this and this. And, it's like, okay, good luck with those things, best of luck to you. Because this place, there comes times where people move on.
It's a natural thing.
I'd seen that many times before. I was like, oh, okay, wasn't really expecting this, but okay. If you know that your time here is done, your time as a comic shop guy is done, then, good luck on the next thing. But I just didn't, I found out through other means, who was going to be helming the store. And that was the thing that was just difficult to, it's been a difficult year this year. So that was just one of those things that was difficult to reconcile. And, it is what it is. And I'm over that part of things and I'm past it, but it's just not, I don't have a connection with that business or relationship, I guess.
No, I understand. I mean, on the one hand, I think it's understandable for someone to want to, have something of their own something of their own. But at the same time, I could see why, it would be disconcerting, that you didn't know that this was happening. Do you have any sense of why you were not told?
I guess it's nobody likes confrontation, right? Most comic shop people don't like confrontation. I think that you may have firsthand experience with that. Maybe Steve liked certain confrontations, and maybe there's other confrontations that he didn't tackle directly, I guess. I don't know.
It would depend. I mean, I think as far as, getting testy with a customer who was annoying him, that was one thing. But I think if it was something beyond that, I don't think he was one who would face the confrontation head on.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. It's a tough thing, but sometimes you have to do difficult things. I don't love confrontations. I'm not a confrontational person, I don't think. But there's some times where you just have to confront the thing, whatever that may be. I was just, I don't know. I wish things had happened in a different way than they did, but you can't do anything about that. It's already done.
So Acme has been here, for such a long time, and I know you've done a lot through events and convention presence and things like that to really cultivate and nurture the comic book community in this area. And the specific things that you've done, I want to get to that in a moment. But if and when like a new store opens up in Greensboro or close by, is there any sense of like they're taking advantage of, like they're capitalizing on your work?
I wouldn't.
Reaping the fruits of your labor?
I would never frame it that way, I would never, because that's not my, I don't know. That's a tough one. I guess I don't plant a flag in that, like, this is my creation, this community is mine. That's not, you can't do that. You can't do that, and I wouldn't do that. But I do know that the comic book community here is unlike anything that I have seen or heard of anywhere else, as far as the interest in reading for entertainment, as far as being plugged in and being informed, as far as really participating with the store, and wanting to show up, wanting to see, something going on. What do we got going on? I'm going to go to that. That's going to be great, for years and years and years. And that is something that I think someone could see without grasping what it truly is and how it is functioning. I don't always claim to understand, why has this happened here? Again, maybe it's forest for the trees. Why has this happened here in ways that has not happened other places? It would be very easy for an outside source to say, oh yeah, something's going on there. Let's get in on that, as opposed to, how can we create, nurture, and maintain that wherever we are, whatever state you're in, or wherever. That might be easy to do.
In the time that I've been here, I was able to hang out with and record with comic book artist Chris Giarrusso. He moved here recently, and he's part of this, comic book artist collective or incubator. They have some office space right around the corner from you. So he and a number of other creators are there. It's a really nice setup, and it was great to be able to chat with him. He described North Carolina and this area specifically as like the new Portland, just how much comic activity there is here in terms of the shops and the conventions and the creators who are here.
I would love for that to be so. Depending on how plugged into comics you are, everybody lives in Portland. It's like this writer, this artist. They all live in Portland. You think it's in this one housing community, all the comic book people live there. But I would love for Greensboro to equally be a destination if you are a comic book creator and you want to plug into a supportive community and you want to actually see firsthand, not hear online or through an email, actually see firsthand that people know who you are, people appreciate your work and what you do, and they want to know what you're doing next. I think that there is the potential for that here. There's a lot of talented people here. Sometimes I'll, mention some names, and people say, well, all those people are here, and there's this studio over here, and there's that studio over there. I had no idea.
As we are recording, a prospective customer is looking into the door. It is a Sunday, and the store is closed, alas.
That's actually a regular customer. That is Kevin Thompson.
So he should know better.
Yes. I think that we saw him a couple of days ago. I think he's probably here to eat at the, my guess, based on nothing, is he's probably here to eat at the Hops hamburger restaurant, is what my guess is. And
yes.
He probably saw the lights on, saw something happening over here, and just wanted to, pop in. So.
Why are you closed on Sundays?
We have basically always been closed on Sunday. It's that's just how it's always been. Now, we have explored being open on Sunday sometimes, maybe 12 years ago, but if you're going to be open on Sunday, that has to be something consistent. You kind of can't sample that one. You have to really be open on Sunday. Now, the nature of the shopping center has changed over the years, in which case, not only are there active restaurants here, the Hops restaurant is a very active restaurant that people come from out of town to get to sample their hamburgers. So there are a lot of people from out of town. Sunday is the day they chose to come here. We are not open on Sundays. So we're considering things.
Yeah, it would seem to make sense to try to capitalize on that. We've, been in town a couple of days, and we keep getting that as a recommendation. So I know it is quite the hot spot.
But the opposite side of what we've just discussed is that's going to be me being here 7 days a week. Not that I'm not going to be here on a Sunday. I've tried to minimize that some, but Sundays when the store is not open, I can get different types of work done that I cannot do during business hours, where I have to interact with customers, I have to do other certain things. Every day has a different flavor of tasks that must be done, by the people that work here. So even if it were not permanent, whatever staff that was here on Sunday, I would feel compelled to be here with them just to kind of observe for myself what's going on and make sure they were comfortable. So that would be a seventh day here. So I don't know if that's That would be very easy for me to do. That would be super easy for me to do, to just all the time here. So I kind of have to be wary of that. I have to keep an eye on that.
Are you ever not here and your staff members are just minding the store?
Lately, in the past, I guess 7 weeks or so, there's been some moments where I've not been here, and the awesome staff here, and I'm talking about Austin, I'm talking about Pete. They've really made it possible for me to not be here. The shop is in excellent hands. They are excellent guys. They've made it possible for me to not be here and not give it a second thought, not worry about anything.
Yeah, I got to meet your crew. They are terrific. Made me feel very welcome.
And the level of dedication, I've been here for 21 years. I sometimes liken myself to, and you may be able to appreciate that. You know how Martian Manhunter is with various iterations of the Justice League? Like, he's there, and then people come and go.
Sure.
I feel like that sometimes, where I've been around for a while, and people come and go in my life. And, I have feelings about that, I guess. But this crew that we have here now, that I have here now, the level of dedication to myself and what this store means to people, and the fact that they are a part of it and they are faces of it, they take that very seriously, and it is beyond appreciated.
Steve always likened it to being a school teacher, where people come through and they're there for a while, and then they move on to the next phase of their life, and maybe from time to time they'll come back and visit. Have you found, like, for the people who have passed through as employees, do they kind of cycle back? Do they still hang around, or once they're gone, they're kind of gone? Like, do they stay on as customers, or are they really out of the picture?
It can vary. There's some people that are absolutely still around, either as active customers or just kind of stop by whenever they're in the area. And there's some people that you just don't see them again. I guess part of me kind of wishes that everybody was all still here all at once. But then, that's not really realistic. Sometimes people move on to that next thing.
This is a question for Lord Retail.
Who do you think you've been talking to this whole time?
Touché. You have a very specific fashion sense. You are known, I feel, for, at least I identify you, with your fedora. Although at the moment you're wearing a cap and not a fedora. But the fedora and the blazer. What is behind the fashion choice?
I think that at some point I was at some convention or something. I just wanted to dress up a litof bit, because that's not something. I'm a jeans and t-shirt guy. That's just what I have been for most of my life. And I just kind of wanted to dress up one time. I wore my red tie and I wore my official Dick Tracy Museum yellow hat, which is not of the best quality. It's not intended to be actively worn. It really isn't. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to dress up a little bit, because why not? But then there did come a point, though, where I think that became something visual was happening there, where people did kind of associate that look with me, with the store. And I've since kind of, and hopefully this is me being smart and not me being vain, is I've kind of acknowledged that iconography, I guess, and I've made little buttons and, commissioned different artists to kind of draw up different versions of that, with the intent that is my brand. And that's not necessarily, it is a part of Acme Comics, yes, but it's also my brand visually. And, I should probably be doing something with that. It's that whole, do you work for Marvel, or do you do some creator-owned stuff? Like, that's kind of this unspoken thing that I've never really articulated before. It's like, and I've been working for Marvel DC for a while. This is awesome stuff to be able to work with, these characters and properties and stuff. But, there comes a point where you've kind of built something that is yours, creator-owned, shall we say. It's a good descriptor, that maybe you need to consider what that is and see what can be done with that.
It's not unlike, a superhero costume.
I think that it is. It could be a mask. When I'm in here, I'm usually on duty. When I'm on this sales floor, I'm in work mode, and I usually stay in work mode for the most part. So
It's interesting that you mentioned, though, the Lord Retail brand and thinking about doing other things with it. Is there anything specific that you'd be willing to share, or is that not ready for public discussion?
it's part not ready, and it's part super obvious. What are my goals? I want for other stores to be able to connect with customers, build customer base, be able to work with the material that they have ordered that shows up. Some stores look at it as, oh, Marvel just sent us a bunch of this stuff here. I don't even know what it is. No, you ordered everything. You decided how many copies of everything you were going to have. And there's ways to present material and work with material. There's always a way to make something work. You just have to kind of measure, what does success look like. So that is my goal. And I think that's kind of always been my goal. I'm just trying to be more official about that, I guess.
I don't know if this is exactly what you were getting at, but I feel like you're describing a type of like Lord Retail consulting business service, perhaps. I know you've talked about in the Greg episode in particular, you talked about like wanting to do like a Kitchen Nightmares type thing where you go into different comic shops and kind of pinpoint where there could be room for improvement.
And I don't mean that in a, I was going through a Gordon Ramsay phase. I don't mean that in a, you were doing this completely wrong
right.
way. But I mean in a, maybe if you move this over here and put that over there, looked at it for a month to see what is happening, maybe something is possible there. Like there's a store that's kind of reached out to some peers that's kind of having a rough time right now. And other peers were giving various types of advice, but what I asked for, I said that what I'm good at, what I need to see is I need to see your store layout. I need video, I need pictures of everything that is, what do customers see when they come in? And I got a lot to work with, and I said to her, do you actually want to know what I think, or are you just kind of, just wondering? So I don't want to be like, this, you need to change that. That needs to not be there. When customers come in, they can't see this thing over here. I don't want to do that if that's not what she's asking for. But she said, she would like to know what I'm seeing. And I think that's something, that's my skill set, that part of it.
I know you can't speak for other stores, but I'm just curious, like, do you think if you, and again, I don't know if this is specifically what you would want to do, but like, let's say you or someone else had this sort of consulting business to help comics retailers, do you think that's something that the average store would be open to, but maybe even beyond that, something that they'd be willing to pay for? Because I feel like that would be a hurdle.
There have been a couple of stores that kind of indicated they might. And even if it's in the form of, just covering my meals or my travel, and that is the, quote unquote payment, just making that possible. But I would love to do that. I have done that in here for 21 years, really looking at things to see, through trial and error, does the Spider-Man display need to be over here, or does it need to be over there? I watch people interact with it. Can they tell it's a Spider-Man display? Do they even know that's what it is? And, I love building displays here. I do. But I can't be so precious that if I watch a customer not know what it is they're looking at, then it's got to be changed. Right behind us there is a, in my opinion, really neat Secret Empire display. But the concern is maybe you have to be standing a number of feet away from it to see that's what it is. If you're right on top of it, you may not know that's what it is right away. And that's something I have to think about.
Yeah, I really want to get into the displays and the physical layout of the store. There's still a lot more for us to discuss. But just for a moment more, staying on this idea of Lord Retail and the Lord Retail brand, I mean, I could see I could hear a Lord Retail podcast. I know there used to be Acme Cast, and that's been defunct for a little while.
Unfortunately, it has been.
But, perhaps, the Lord Retail podcast could be a new direction to go in.
I've considered it. It's just as we've talked about, that day job takes a lot of that energy that you would have for your other projects. Even if your other projects still kind of tie into the day job, that day job saps so many resources and so much of your energy that you would use to do these things that probably need to be done.
Preaching to the choir, sir. And I don't know. I mean, at least like in my case, I don't know if it helps or hurts that my day job is completely unrelated to this. Maybe it would be tough to be at a comic shop all day and then sit down and record the Lord Retail podcast. I don't know if you just kind of overload at a certain point.
Like sometimes people ask me, how often do you go on vacation? And I'll say, do you count a comic book convention as a vacation? If you do not, then I'm not sure. If you consider that to be part of work, then I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, the daily grind of being a comics retailer, that was something that I saw and heard a lot from Steve. And so I know, this can be an all-consuming thing. What is your daily or weekly routine like? I mean, are you here all hours of the night? Are you able to take a vacation? I mean, I used to just address that. I suppose maybe the answer is no.
I can, but I often just don't. That's on me that I don't do that. I'm getting much better about that. In the past few weeks, I have begun to leave at the same time Pete and Austin do. And I have kind of adopted the thinking that work will be here. Whatever I didn't get finished today, it will be here tomorrow, and it will be addressed tomorrow. For many, many, many years, I'll always find something to do here. And I would just stay here finding things to do. But I'm definitely doing less of that. And it doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel like I'm, abandoning my post. It doesn't feel that way. It just feels like, I've given what I needed to today, and whatever I didn't get to will be here tomorrow, along with tomorrow's other designated work. But it'll be here. There's certain things I have to get done by certain times. Like, okay, this person is expecting me to evaluate their collection by this time. Okay, or this thing, the previous order must be completed by this time. So there's certain things that have to be done at certain times, but it feels good to put some parameters on myself.
And I would imagine that ultimately leads to a better store experience for yourself and the people who come through the doors. Because, I mean, I saw with Steve, I mean, that grind, can kind of wear you down. And if it ends up affecting, I'm not saying it does in your case, but, for that general retailer, I mean, if it affects your demeanor where you're tired or you're overwhelmed or you're frustrated and that seeps into those customer interactions, perhaps it could be off-putting or result in someone not having the best experience. So I think taking the time for yourself ultimately in the end benefits the store.
And you cannot please everyone all the time, even though we are, we're in the people-pleasing business, right? Isn't that what we're here for? But you can't please everyone, but you certainly want to try. And, there's people that have known me for a long, long time. Like just yesterday, I think you saw some people that kind of noticed I'd had some coffee. I'm pretty caffeine sensitive. I am. And there's some people that's like, you had coffee today, haven't you?
It was amazing because, when I saw you later at night, you really didn't have. You said you didn't remember some of the afternoon. That it was kind of all a blur. It's like you blacked out from coffee.
Yeah, you were talking to coffee the whole time, not me.
Yeah, and I said, I was like, well, should I bring you coffee when we record? Because that way you'll forget what we talked about, and when you listen to it, it'll be like you're listening to a brand new episode. It'll be great.
Seriously, I'm very caffeine sensitive. If I have a cup of coffee in the morning, I'm still feeling it that night. Because I guess I don't drink coffee all the time. You're drinking a coffee right now, which is astounding to me. What time is it right now and you're having coffee?
So we talked about this yesterday, but I need my coffee at like 9 or not between 9 and 9:30 and then 2:30. Those are 2 times a day I need it. And it's funny because I was never a coffee drinker, even throughout law school when a lot of my peers were. In fact, there was one time where I got a large, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, I'll just try it. I got a large iced coffee from Dunkin' Donuts on the way to class, and I drank it during this 2-hour class, and I was wired. I actually got up during the class to go to the restroom, and I walked into the wall. I mean, I was literally bouncing off the walls. But once I started working my 9 to 5 full-time job, I just, I don't know, I guess I needed it in the morning to wake up, and now it's part of the routine. But
yeah, if I have coffee at 2 o'clock, I'm still awake at like 6 a.m. There'll come a point where I notice I've stopped blinking. That's when I know, okay, it's working. We're good.
Well, I guess the last thing that I want to ask you, well, probably not the last thing. I'm sure more will come up, but
I should hope not.
No, not certainly not the last thing generally, but the last thing about the Lord Retail and the Lord Retail brand. I mean, because this is funny. So my wife and I were part of this. I don't know what you want to call it, a entrepreneur group, a few of us who have sort of these side businesses and projects that we're working on, and we have monthly Skype calls and email chains and things like that, and it's been cool to speak with other people who are trying to do something on the side and things like that. And one of our most recent discussion, we talked about our brands, like what are the qualities of our work, our product, our services that we want people to associate with us. And I had to do some self-reflection and think what is it that I want people to associate with when they think of My Comic Shop History and Flat Squirrel Productions. And ultimately what I landed on, because this is, I guess, something that I've heard from time to time with both the My Comic Shop documentary and by Spoon and the podcast, is that when I'm presenting these stores, it's not, sunshine and rainbows, that you do get the the ups and downs, the challenges and the rewards. My goal, I suppose, is always to try to present both sides. But for you, I'm curious, what are the qualities that you want your brand, the Lord Retail brand, associated with? Like, what do you want people to think of when they think Lord Retail?
Wow, Anthony, you were asking me a direct question about myself. We went over this. I think that first and foremost, I want people to know that I'm being genuine. I've come to appreciate the value of genuine and sincere people. Not that I didn't appreciate that, but it really means a great deal to me at this stage in life, 41 years old. It means pretty much everything. So I want people to know that I am from a genuine place of concern and well-being for the success of a shop. Because when you're talking about a comic book store, you're talking about a small business with people that probably have families, people that have made tremendous sacrifices. Maybe they're not taking a salary. Maybe, they're missing out on, talent shows, or they're missing out on birthday parties because they got to be at the store. I would want those people to be able to do well and to succeed. Not if you're just trying to, turn the latest variant cover for, maximum dollars, not that. But if you're really, a good shop, and you're really trying to do your best, and you're trying to be a good member of your community, which is important, then I want to help with that in whatever way I can with the skills and knowledge that I have. If I can do something to help with that, I want to do that.
Well said, my friend. So we still need to discuss Acme itself, the store layout, your displays, all of the things that you do to engage with your customers and with the comic community. And, like I said at the top, I want to get your take on the role of the retailer today and how that's changed over the course of your tenure, and also kind of touch on the state of the industry as well, because there's always a lot said and discussed about it, and I sort of want to get your take, because you are here, in the heart of it. But I think before we get into that, we should take a break and go get some burgers at Hops, and then come back and record the second half of this crossover episode. What do you think?
I'm excited about it. I say it needs to be 3 episodes. If only we had the Acme Cast up and running. That's where the third part could be, the lost episode.
All right, so let's do that. So thank you very much for being on this episode of My Comic Shop History.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
So we're going to keep talking for the second half of our conversation. Listeners, be sure to tune in next week, October 4th, to Flat Squirrel Tales Beyond My Comic Shop. It's a separate podcast. You can access it the same way you do My Comic Shop History. It's available on Podomatic. That's where it's hosted. And you can also get it through Apple Podcasts. So Flat Squirrel Tales in 1 week for the second half of my conversation with Jermaine Exum, a.k.a. Lord Retail. And then 2 weeks from today, My Comic Shop History will be back with an all-new episode featuring the comic book shop in Wilmington, Delaware. We'll see you then. Don't be a flat squirrel.